There he is. Hello. How are you, sir?
I'm good. How about yourself?
I'm just fine, thanks. Very nice to meet you.
Sure. Good to meet you
Privilege.
as well.
Yes.
And I've met Lori before online. So there we go.
So now we want our audience to meet you, and I'm just going to read the bio you sent me. Caleb Maupin is a journalist and political analyst who lives in New York City, not Russia. Originally from Ohio, he studied political science at Baldwin Wallace College. He's been a featured speaker at international conferences in Moscow, Tehran, Caracas, and Quito, Ecuador, among other places. Caleb is currently the primary American correspondent for Russia Today television, covering events at the United Nations, the State Department, the Pentagon, the White House. In addition to his journalism, analysis, and commentary on RT, he's also a political organizer with the Center for Political Innovation, or CPI. CPI is co-sponsoring the big Rage Against the War Machine rally in Washington, D.C. this month, February 19th. And it's a huge anti-war event, which will feature guests such as our friend Scott Ritter, friend of the show here, former presidential candidates Tulsi Gabbard, Ron Paul, my man, Dennis Kucinich, and Jill Stein, former Green Party presidential candidate, along with many other prominent advocates for peace, including our friend Jimmy Dore, who will also be there. And Caleb, are you speaking at that event?
Well, we're having a bit of an after party, a reception.
Yeah.
So that'll be good. Yeah. It's actually going to be Elizabeth from the Center for Political Innovation. She'll be speaking at the closing rally, from what I understand. And yeah, we're then having an evening event on February 19th at a hotel very close to where the rally ends, at the White House, Lafayette Park. So I'll be there with a number of people. We're going to have some guest speakers join us. It'll be a great evening reception, lots of food and music, etc. So I'll be there.
That's fantastic. I love what you're doing with CPI, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show. I mean, obviously there's curiosity. Rick and I are both long time mainstream media journalists who have gone independent because we just couldn't stand working for mainstream media anymore. But we're both big fans of RT, and I've been watching your work for many years, Caleb, and really appreciate what you do. So we want to talk a little bit. I'd like to start out, if you just tell the audience a little bit about how you ended up working for a Russian TV network. Let's start there.
Well, I had been part of the International Action Center, which is an activist organization, a nonprofit run by former U.S. Attorney General Ramsey Clark. He was the U.S. Attorney General under Lyndon
LBJ.
Johnson. Yeah. And he became an anti-war activist and a critic of the American criminal justice system after he left office. And he set up a nonprofit called the International Action Center. And I began working for them around 2010. During Occupy Wall Street, I was their main media spokesperson. I represented them on Press TV from Iran, Turkish television, and RT, and gave analysis. And I began giving analysis for these different TV networks, representing Ramsey Clark and his organization. After that, I worked for a while as a correspondent for Press TV, which I was their UN reporter, and I reported for the English language network from Iran. And then I got hired in 2016 to work at RT. And I've been there ever since. And it's a great job, and I can't imagine working anywhere else. I really love it. So it's pretty good. Yeah.
So in other words, every network that you work for has been banned by the United States.
It's a good point.
Press TV was also banned, correct?
Well, I mean, I don't know what banned means. I mean, the website is still there. I do know that presstv.com was seized by the American government. Presstv.ir is still up there, and you can still watch it on international satellite television. But yeah, the .com was seized by the American government as some kind of an attack on Iran. And, they've made a point of making anyone who does any work with them quite uncomfortable. I would get harassed at the airport every time I would go to Iran, and, things like that. And, they don't particularly like Press TV, just like they don't like RT. They want a monopoly. And they call these outlets state-controlled media, but these are like PBS. They're private corporations that receive some subsidy from the government, but they're not, technically state media. They're not like Voice of America. And we know at this point in the United States, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, they are directly controlled by the American intelligence agencies, the CIA, the FBI. I mean, the Twitter files have made this abundantly clear. Go and read what Elon Musk has revealed. So this idea that, CNN, that's just free thought. That's just the reporters reporting what they want. But
I call CNN the CIA news network.
It's quite a double standard we get from the American government. So,
That's
the narrative around that. And I will tell you what I know this. I mean, I know this for a fact, which is that we are held to a much higher standard at RT when it comes to accuracy. Because if we make a mistake, everyone is looking on, to accuse us of being propaganda. So we are very careful. We go through everything. And when we make a mistake, we always publish a retraction. Mainstream media doesn't do any of that. They get on there and they lie all the time about Russia, about China, about Iran, about Venezuela, about Cuba, about Nicaragua. And they don't retract it ever. They don't apologize for it ever, and everyone just accepts it. So because we are held to such a high standard, we have a much higher rate of accuracy. And there's been many stories that we've been way ahead of. The mainstream media was catching up with us on covering. And I know for a fact also that in the CNN newsroom, in the MSNBC and Fox newsroom, they have our feed at RT playing 24/7, and they are watching.
I bet they do.
And if we get on top of something, they panic and they say, we better cover it. So those Russians, they don't get to be the ones crafting the narrative around it. We got to take control. And I've seen that. There are examples I can think of where we covered something and the mainstream media saw us, and the next week they were running to catch up with us. So I think if anything, we're keeping CNN and MSNBC on their toes by doing the work they should be doing and challenging the rich and powerful in the United States.
How does the editorial process there work? The story selection process? Are you sort of self-assigning and then it could get approval from the assignment desk, or how does that process work for you?
Well, it's just like any other network. There are certain stories that need to be covered. There's a writing process where I write my packages. There are editors that I work with. I mean, it's just like any other TV network in that sense.
So would these concerns that some people have, where they say that RT is just a propaganda network, are misplaced? I mean, how much freedom do you have, or how much control do they have over, the end product?
Let me put it this way. Propaganda by definition is media that is putting out one specific viewpoint. It is designed to convince you of a certain view. If you watch RT, you will see a far wider variety of perspectives on world events, on domestic politics in the United States and around the world than you will ever see in American mainstream media. You will hear conservatives, you will hear libertarians, you will hear socialists and leftists, you will hear Muslims, you will hear Orthodox Jews and Christians, you will hear strong supporters of Israel and strong critics of Israel. You will hear a far wider variety of views on our network. So by definition, that is not propaganda. If it was propaganda, it would be pushing one view, and it's clearly not doing that.
And that's one of the reasons I love RT and why I watched RT and still do for 11 years is that's where I could hear libertarian voices like Dr. Ron Paul, who's completely censored off the mainstream media here in the United States. And I could hear Jesse Ventura. They had a regular show for Jesse every Friday night on RT America. And yes, those alternative voices and viewpoints that you just can't get here in the States, and probably not in Canada either on your state media. I mean, you have state-sponsored media there in Canada, Rick. They make no secret of it.
Well, all the media is state-sponsored now. They're all receiving subsidies. All of the mainstream media. It's no longer just the CBC. I used to work at CTV, and they're, taking money from the government now because they claim they're claiming to be impoverished when I don't think that's quite the case.
I'd like to show you guys a little bit of Caleb's work. Let's take a look at some of his reporting on RT here. If you can pull up my screen there, Rick.
Oh, yeah, sure. I can do that.
Investigative journalist by clandestine has shaken up social media once again, this time reminding people about the leaked phone call that took place then Vice President Joe Biden with then President of Ukraine, Poroshenko, back in 2016. The American VP was on the phone with Poroshenko, discussing aspects of Ukraine's financial system. Biden had some very specific demands regarding certain banks.
What I don't want to have happen, I don't want Trump to get in a position where he thinks he's about to buy onto a policy where the financial system is going to collapse and he's going to be looked to pour more money into Ukraine. That's how he'll think about it before he gets sophisticated enough to know the details. So anything you can do to push the Pravda Bank to closure so that the IMF loan comes forward, I would respectfully suggest is critically important to your economic as well as physical security.
Now, that last sentence apparently sounds a bit like a threat. Is this the way you would expect the sovereign leaders of two independent countries to speak with one another? Why is it that Joe Biden would speak this way to a foreign head of state? And what is Biden getting at when he says sophisticated enough to know the details? So many questions and so few answers. Anyway, Poroshenko replied that he was simply waiting for the auditor's report from Ernst & Young to come out. And once that happened, he would assemble the head of the National Bank of Ukraine, government officials, and the Minister of Finance all get together and make the ultimate decision.
The only reason I have, after 22nd, when I have an audit report, we have a voting of the budget in the parliament, whereas Kolomoisky has a significant number of members of parliament. And the prime minister asked me to vote budget first and then launching the process.
And then Biden promises he's going to keep everything a secret. And on December 18th, 2016, everything went ahead just as planned. Privat Bank was nationalized, just as Biden had stipulated. Now, the main stockholder mentioned by Poroshenko, Ukrainian oligarch Igor Kolomoisky, he was outraged and said it had been done without proper procedure and was purely a government grab. But who actually cares, especially when the International Monetary Fund, which provided Ukraine with $17.5 billion in aid in 2015, backed the decision to nationalize Privat Bank? Now, some critics look at this and say the whole thing looks like a giant fraud, with the IMF and the Ukrainian government, that's supposedly sovereign, playing along with Biden. And who can forget how Joe Biden bragged about getting a prosecutor fired in Ukraine, a prosecutor who was investigating his son's company, Burisma Holdings. Western media would have us believe that Ukraine is a totally independent country and that Russia is rolling in to take it over. However, leaks like this suggest that Ukraine has been firmly in the pockets of certain people, not people in Kiev, but on Wall Street and in London, and of course in Washington, D.C. Caleb Maupin, RT, New York.
Great stuff, Caleb.
Thanks.
Great stuff.
Yeah, well,
that's more information than we would ever get out of CNN or MSNBC or even Fox about the situation with Biden and Poroshenko and Ukraine. We've only been told half the story. And yet here in North America, it seems our government just doesn't want us to have the other side of the story. And they think we're too dumb to find RT on Rumble or Odyssey or other platforms. I mean, it's still out there. It's just not on your local cable or satellite provider.
Sure. Yeah, well, the narrative we get in the United States is that Ukraine is just totally free and independent, and Russia is moving in to threaten their great sovereignty or something, when facts like this point to Ukraine being very much a colony of Wall Street. And not only is it a colony of Wall Street, but it's a place that the USA has been pouring huge amounts of weapons into, and it's been killing its own people for 8 years straight. In Donetsk and Lugansk, it's been bombing and killing civilians and shelling people, and they signed a treaty, the Minsk Agreement, that was supposed to grant rights to the Russian-speaking people of the eastern regions, let them elect their own government, let them vote for the Communist Party, the Party of Regions, and their own political parties, but they didn't recognize that. And after 8 years of not ending their relentless bombings and attacks on the people of the eastern regions, and piling in more weapons from the United States and threatening to get nuclear weapons, Russia decided they had to move in and protect those people in the eastern regions. And that's what this conflict is about. It didn't start last year. It started 8 years ago when the United States toppled the elected leader of the government in Ukraine, Yanukovych, and installed fanatically anti-Russian forces that only had support in the western parts of the country, and basically locked the people in the eastern regions out of the political process, outlawed their language, etc. I mean, I always tell people, like, in America, if we had some like racist sheriff or governor in a southern state, and he said, any Latin person who speaks Spanish, we're gonna put him in jail, we're gonna drag him into court, and give him a ticket for speaking their language because this is America, we speak English, we would immediately be outraged about that. We'd say
that's a great point.
Yeah. But in Ukraine for the past 8 years, people have been getting tickets, getting dragged into court, getting fined simply for speaking Russian, when like 42% of the population at least speak Russian in their homes. This is ridiculous. We get upset, and rightly upset, about Charlottesville and how there were crowds of people with tiki torches marching to defend Confederate memorials. Well, for the past 8 years in Ukraine, there have been crowds of people with tiki torches tearing down monuments to those who defeated Hitler and those who died in World War II. And this has been going on for 8 years straight. I mean, and we don't hear about it because Western media has a bone to pick with Russia. But the reality of the situation is very, very different than what we're hearing on CNN.
And I don't even know what the death toll really is for what's happened in the Donbass since 2014. I've heard in the neighborhood of 14,000 killed. Some say that's a genocide. And I know you don't really have a crystal ball and you can't really see into Vladimir Putin's mind, but can you explain what took Putin 8 years to finally fight back?
I think that Russia did everything they could do to avoid having to go into Ukraine. I think that's really what happened. They facilitated the Minsk agreements. It was back in 2014 that the Donetsk People's Republic and the Lugansk People's Republic declared independence from Ukraine. They declared they were independent governments. And at that point, they wanted Russia to recognize their independent governments. And Russia said no. And instead, they set up the Minsk Accords, the Minsk Agreement. And they tried to facilitate Ukraine gradually letting these folks back into Ukraine. That's what Russia wanted to happen. But the Minsk Agreement was not implemented. Year after year, it wasn't implemented. And Russia worked very, very hard to try and de-escalate things. There was a lot of hope when Zelensky got elected. Zelensky was elected on a platform of being the peace candidate. He was going to get along better with Russia. And there was a lot of hope in Russia that maybe Zelensky would be a better president who could resolve things. The guy before Zelensky, Poroshenko, he was like an anti-Russia fanatic. But Zelensky, they thought, might be a little bit better. This guy's a comedian. He's kind of more worldly. And, and they thought that might be the case. But it turns out that really wasn't the case. But, that story I did, I mean, the fact that, Burisma Holdings, that's been revealed. Trump revealed about how Joe Biden's son, right after the 2014 coup, Hunter Biden, he started working for a natural gas company in Ukraine, even though he doesn't know anything about natural gas. And he started getting, huge paychecks every month, to work for this natural gas company in Ukraine. We don't even know if he ever even went to Ukraine. He just happened to get hired by this natural gas company.
Yeah, it was basically a no-show job, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, that was pretty ridiculous. And the more you look into this, the more corruption is involved. The weapons contractors are making lots of money off of pouring weapons into Ukraine, the military-industrial complex, and also the oil companies. I mean, since this war has gotten going, you remember at the beginning of the pandemic, the oil prices just plummeted, right? And those fracking companies were going out of business. But then, since this war in Ukraine has gotten going, they've pushed all the Russian oil off the market and the oil prices have shot through the roof. We're paying for it at the gas pump, right? I mean, where our gas prices are through the roof, but ExxonMobil, BP, Shell, and Chevron, they are making a killing off of this, right? This is a great opportunity because Russia is their competitor. That's what's going on here. Russia is an oil and gas exporting country. They're a competitor with the Wall Street oil and gas companies, and that's why they want them off the market.